Welcome to MAP, the bi-weekly market access podcast hosted by me, Dr. Stefan Walzer. I am the innovator of Market Access 4.0 and a health economist by training and working in the fields of market access, reimbursement, pricing, and health economics since 2004. Discover Market Access 4.0 and unveil the future with our innovative solutions. Max Insights, our fast and easy AI-based reimbursement planning platform. Dobo, our new revolutionizing way of creating reimbursement dossiers across the globe with the first and only dossier writing AI bot. Cubo, our new AI-based objection handling platform. And Waffle, train with Waffle's virtual reality genius in an immersive environment and with an AI-based counterpart. We are Market Access 4.0, so check out our website, marketaccess4-0.com. And now let's dive into the current discussions, processes, and trends in market access across the globe. Welcome to another episode of the Market Access podcast. Today, I have Alexander Natz as a special guest. Very welcome, Alexander. Whoever does not know Alexander, just very briefly from my side. And then, of course, Alexander, please feel free to add anything what is being missing. I think Alexander is the Secretary General of EUCOPE, the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs, based in Brussels. He has long been at the center of European pharmaceutical policy, advising innovative pharma and biotech companies on EU regulation, market access, pricing, and reimbursement. And of course, with your experience spanning industry, competition law, and European policy, you bring a sharp perspective on how innovation, regulation, patient access intersect across Europe. Very welcome, Alexander.
Thank you very much, Stefan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very good. Perfect. So, of course, I could imagine, especially, let's say, as you are working on, let's say, the intersection between probably one of the key European markets, Germany, plus the European overall market environment, you have been quite busy, especially, let's say, in the last, 12, 14, 15 months with all of the different changes, ranging from JCA introduction early last year down to different kind of new, maybe call it regulations or interactions with the US government versus Europe. So how would you describe the current transformation of market access in Europe with all of those different aspects currently in mind?
Yeah, absolutely right, Stefan. It's a time where we do see so much new legislation passing Brussels in rapid speed, I must say. It's a time when we have the European Health Technology Assessment, the JCA, up and running since, 14 months now, where we haven't seen the first outcomes, I must say. So it's a time of uncertainty, a bit of unpredictability. But that's only Brussels. I mean, there is the Biotech Act, there is a Critical Medicines Act, there's a JCA, there's a general pharmaceutical legislation. And I'm really happy to talk more about that because it's very impactful at the regulatory level and also when it comes to intellectual property rights. So many messages in Europe, which we're sending across the Atlantic, where we hope the message is very clearly that it's absolutely worth to come to Europe to continue to bring your product to countries like Germany, but also beyond other European countries. So definitely it's busy times when it comes to European legislation and all those new procedures.
Very good. So I think you mentioned already a couple of different buzzwords. And I mean, I like that you especially said towards the end, I think Europe is still key. And I think it's the right message maybe as well sent to the different other countries, but also, of course, to companies. Taking that as a potential, let's say, next step, what is the key opportunity with all of the different acts and regulations you currently have in mind? What is the key opportunity from your perspective? Maybe also where are current risks? I know that not everything is, of course, directly seen as an opportunity. Maybe we as well need to, let's say, fine-tune a couple of further regulations in order to be even a bit more industry friendly, if I can call it like that.
I mean, the strength of Europe, first of all, is its size in terms of almost 450 million inhabitants. The strength of Europe is very much also a network of clinicians and a network of university hospitals across the different countries, which is definitely very relevant, and is not existing anywhere else in the world, I would even say. So there is a value in bringing your medicine to Europe, and also to make it available for European patients. Now, when I look at the legislative level, at the legislative procedures, there are pros and cons, as always. When I look at the general pharmaceutical legislation, for example, to start with a positive, there is a concept called regulatory sandboxes, where there is a lot of more flexibility granted to the European Medicines Agency to look into individual products to prioritize individual products. But there's also a so-called platform approach, which very much looks into mRNA, and also individualized medicines, personalized medicine. So there are really promising concepts on the horizon. And when I say on the horizon, they are not too far away. These are concepts which will be available to companies in the next, sometimes in the next 6 months, for other concepts in 12 months. So at the regulatory level, at the level of networks of clinicians, I would say that's on the positive side of Europe. What I think is more on the negative side is, and it might send the wrong message, is that we are actually de facto we're reducing IP rights in the general pharmaceutical legislation. We're coming from 8 + 2 years regulatory data protection, 10 years of orphan exclusivity. We now start orphan exclusivity baseline with 9 years. We reduce baseline regulatory data protection by 1 year. I don't want to get too technical, but the message which we're sending to companies around the globe is only if you meet certain conditions, you can live up, you can get up to the level of IP protection which you're currently having. So that's tricky, I find, as a message. There is also complexity in terms of like the launch obligation. Some people call it the launch obligation. It's not a launch obligation, but it's de facto, it is reducing IP protection further, allowing quicker entry of generics into certain markets. But I think here we have to put it in perspective. It might not be the right message for innovative pharma and biotech companies to put forward a launch obligation. That's a downside. On the other hand, it is also an opportunity to make companies think about, shouldn't we broaden our launch sequencing? Shouldn't we go beyond those typical 4, 5, 6 countries where centrally approved medicines have been launched in the past? Should we go broader? And also the sanction involved here is rather small, because it only takes away 1 year of IP protection, and only in the countries where you don't manage to find an agreement with the payer. So it is not as big as some companies on the other side of the Atlantic might think it is, because it's far away from compulsory licensing or anything like that. It's a very small sanction in terms of IP protection. And it's also an opportunity, you could argue, to bring your product to more European patients. But I stop there. So pros and cons for sure.
Yeah, no, that's of course quite a lot of different things happening. As you just said, it's maybe just a few and couple of things you just mentioned. I think, of course, let's see from the, if I take it correctly, of course, from the regulatory side, I think sandbox options and platform kind of approaches, that sounds, of course, quite interesting, quite promising. Maybe you can as well allude there a bit that people who are just maybe hearing that for the first time have a bit of a better understanding. If this is, of course, I guess also a bit of a short-term option in the next couple of, let's say, few months. And then, of course, the other part is quite clearly, let's say, the kind of launch obligation, as you already said. I think there is maybe as well the kind of risk, and that's a discussion we have had as well a couple of times now. Of course, launch sequencing is important, also from a pricing perspective / commercial perspective. I think price differentiation is nothing bad. I think that has and is happening everywhere, not only in the pharmaceutical world. But I mean, if you have suddenly, let's say, the obligation to move within a given time frame across all of the European countries, I mean, this is potentially making life even more difficult, especially nowadays also with MFN coming further over with the different kind of price anchors, not only within Europe, but maybe also outside. But maybe step by step. Maybe we could first start a bit on those two concepts you just introduced very quickly. And then thereafter, we could maybe take the second part, which is the launch obligation, maybe coupled as well a bit with the MFN risk.
No, you're hinting absolutely to the right factor. And that is that the launch sequencing for companies tends to get more limited. And it starts earlier. It starts already with filing a marketing authorization application at EMA, which triggers the JCA, as we all know. It triggers in a certain indication, oncology and ATMP nowadays only, but in starting from next year or in 2 years, also for oncology medicine. So filing with EMA would trigger the JCA, which is in a way leading over into national pricing and reimbursement procedures. It kicks the HTA off, I would say.
Yeah.
That is different today. When we look at AMNOG, I could still choose my launch sequencing when I launch in Germany, when I have my marketing authorization at EMA level in my hand. So I could still say I'm only launching 4 months later in Lauer-Taxe and then trigger AMNOG. That's not possible anymore. That the AMNOG would continue with the JCAs to seize. The second point is what you're mentioning, what people call the launch obligation, which again restricts my ability to decide when to launch where. Now, the political rationale behind it is very justified to say, like, well, it's a centrally approved medicine, and normally you should try to bring it to all European patients. That's a political rationale, which makes complete sense behind it. But especially for the smaller companies, and many of them have like 10 to 15 people sitting in Zurich or Zug, they might not even have a German branch or a French branch. It's a challenge to bring a product and to run that product through 20 or 25 different pricing and reimbursement procedures in a given period of time of 3 years. I would even go that far to say it might be a challenge for the bigger companies. So that what people call the launch obligation, which is completely justified in political terms, might turn out to be perceived as something which is more on the negative side, and where companies, especially smaller companies, might think, well, can we actually handle this? Okay. Mm. Now, the third point you're mentioning is even bigger, which is MFN implications. The United States referencing European prices in generous, it's the EU, the G7 plus Switzerland and Denmark, which makes that decision even more impactful about where to launch, at what price to launch in European countries. So that is definitely a big game changer, which happened over the last, I would say, 1.5 years, where I do hope that we keep Europe as attractive as it is today, and where we also need to explain. And I started to explain a little bit in my previous answer to say, well, look, the launch obligation, it might sound very big. It might sound like, I got the question lately, is it compulsory licensing? No, it's not. It's far away from compulsory licensing. We need to put it in the perspective as well for our colleagues on the other side of the Atlantic to make sure that they do understand that it's worth coming to Europe. It's not a complete game changer. But you're right, Stefan, all those three elements, JCA, launch obligation, and MFN, is requires adaptation in companies.
Yeah. And I mean, the key point is, of course, always, and again, we know that generally from economics, uncertainty is the big kind of issue whenever it comes to decision making within companies, of course. And I mean, a lot of those things, as you just said, is maybe still not quite clear to everybody. You just said as well, the kind of launch application is one key element of that, at least what I have heard. But even with MFN, I mean, we have as well spoken to a couple of, let's say, people and companies where it was not very clear for everybody how that could have potentially impacted, and not even speaking about JCA, of course. So I think it has a lot of those different kind of aspects, which adds uncertainty on it. But I think to make it also clear, and that's also what you said, I mean, it's not as bad as maybe one could foresee from outside. Of course, the whole kind of, let's say, process has changed in the last couple of months, but it's maybe just another process which is maybe being added. And maybe we could even just say, as you said it as well, with the regulatory filing, you basically kick off HTA, as you already said. I mean, you could, of course, well just turn that. I mean, if you file from a regulatory perspective, you at least had as well in the past the ambition, I would guess, to go through one or the other HTA anyway, because otherwise you could not launch in Europe, right? So it's not that it's so different ultimately, right? But maybe turning as well a bit into, let's say, the JCA part. I mean, you're right, and we're all waiting for the kind of initial feedback and the like. Anything what you have maybe heard from different stakeholders so far in terms of the process? I mean, maybe as well thinking a bit about the potentially limited number of consultations available. Anything which might change the next couple of, let's say, few weeks, months, maybe years, or is it rather, let's say, quite fixed, and maybe we just see what is happening in the next 2 to 4 years with a lot of further indications and let's say products on there? I mean, we've seen that as well with AMNOG. I think a lot has changed also within the first 2 to 4 years. I mean, that's, I think, part of the overall system and the system change. But any insight you can share?
No, you're right. I mean, it's in AMNOG, we still say it's a learning system. It took some time to get it up and running, but I must say, if I be totally honest, I mean, it's a process which is up and running and which to a certain extent seems to be predictable. Not for any product. There are different outcomes. It depends on the comparator that has been chosen by GBA. That's very decisive in that procedure. And that gets me over to the JCA. I mean, why is the JCA so relevant? I mean, I heard a lot of people saying for a long time, well, JCA is only a recommendation, but it chooses the comparator. It chooses the PICO scheme. And that's where it is so impactful for following national pricing and reimbursement procedures, because it chooses the comparator or PICO scheme. And I would have my doubts from all those discussions that if a PICO scheme has been chosen at the EU level, that it would be different at the national level. They would all feed in their PICO scheme, what they think is a comparator, whether it's the Greek one, the French one, the German one, the Polish one, and then they would take it, forum shop it, take it back home and do their P&R processes based on that comparator. That's what I've heard from GBA since the beginning, and that's how other countries will pursue with the JCA. So it is extremely relevant for that reason. What do I hear? What do I see? First of all, big surprise, only 13 procedures. I think that is a surprise. We had expected more in oncology and in ATMPs. That is quite relevant. And it's I wouldn't say it's a warning sign, but if we're keeping up that level of procedures, I think we need to talk how we can make sure that companies actually pursue with that procedure. Now, the second thing is I have first of all lots of compliments to be made to the members of the coordination group. It's a big challenge to align on methodology. It's a big challenge to align on procedure. It's not easy to do that with 27 different countries. Some of them having huge experience in HTA, others have non-experience in HTA, some of them having very different procedures in HTA. So a big compliment to the coordination group that they managed to get where we are. Third thing is there are very good horizontal interactions. The European trade organizations are in permanent contact with the Commission, also partly with the coordination group in the HTA stakeholder network, to point to the fact that we think there needs to be, and these are our so to say ask, more interaction before and during the procedure. It is not only around horizontal discussions, it's around discussions about the individual product. And there's only one stakeholder that can do that with a coordination group, and that's a company and not trade organizations. Mm-hmm. That needs to be increased. We need to be reasonable on the PICO scheme in terms of the amount of PICO schemes, that we're not ending up with 10 as an average number, if I may say. We are fully aware of the fact that standards of care look different from country to country, and that there might be a different comparator. We're not, that's fully clear, but we need to be reasonable. We need to align behind some comparators, so not to end up with 10 in average. Detailed discussions about reduction principles. We had that, I think, in AMNOG in the early days as well. What can I redact in my dossier? What ends up in the public domain? We're early stage. Yeah. We are before marketing authorization. There is a lot of confidentiality. Some discussions, that's number 4, around eligibility of products. I mean, what constitutes a cancer medicine? It is defined in the documents that have been put forward by the European Commission, but it's not always that clear cut. So I think that's on the positive side, the opportunity to really interact with the Secretariat in the Commission to check in on eligibility, as we also had very often the question, 8 + 2 years RDP or only 1 year RDP, does that trigger AMNOG for that product and so on? And these discussions about eligibility are key. So overall, I would say a bit of a surprise that we don't have so many procedures, which might increase in the course, or I'm sure it will increase in the course of this year. But we are on the way to make it and we are part of that as EUCOPE, as a trade organization, which is part of the HTA stakeholder network. So we also have a duty to fill to not only be part of that discussion, but also make sure that our companies comply with those provisions and enter the procedure.
Yeah, that's great insights. Maybe taking this well a bit further. I mean, when you combine, let's say, JCA and launch obligation, and I'm sure that also different, even let's say, quite strong HTA processes, like in Germany, like in France, might further adopt to the JCA environment. Also happy to hear your thoughts on this one, but maybe even taking a bit into some of the other markets where you could as well imagine potentially even a scenario where those countries automatically, let's say, start their HTA process after the JCA process because of the launch obligation, independent if a company would submit their case or not. Is that something you would, I don't want to say foresee, but is that a scenario which is currently being discussed as well in Brussels? And I mean, I would personally not see that as very beneficial for the overall ecosystem, but is that maybe a way moving forward as well?
I mean, if I understand correctly, the question around the JCA and the launch obligation so far has been discussed in isolation.
Yeah,
it has not been really, because it comes from a different a piece of legislation, and it's dealt with in different units of the European Commission. So there's no connection, no direct connection. However, what your question is hinting into the right direction, that there is de facto for a company, there is an interaction. And as I said before, there's a lot of explanation that needs to be done around. It's not really a launch obligation, but no one has a better word these days. So everyone calls it a launch obligation. We shouldn't call it like that. It is de facto an incentive to bring the product to all the EU countries, and that sounds already, I think, quite a bit better. There's no direct interaction at this level.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. Very good. Moving a bit further, I mean, not what we have touched base as of now, but I mean, we also have the European health data space, which I think is also quite a promise, I would guess in general. If we take that from a market access perspective, what general impact would you expect on evidence generation, maybe as well on HTA and real world evidence use, maybe especially from a European perspective in the near term? Or is that maybe something we just say, it's maybe an early start, still a lot to be further, let's say, adopted. Hence, we probably still need to wait quite a bit until we see potential benefits / opportunities.
Probably we'll have to wait a bit to see the outcome. But I do think that it's a piece of legislation which can turn things to the positive. I do think that in 2 years' time, we will hopefully talk about the European health data space as one of the assets, as one of the as being on the pro side of Europe when it comes to making decisions for companies, because I think the intention is very clear, is to foster data sharing, is to promote more the idea of real world evidence. I mean, the European health data space is not per se about real world evidence, and it's not per se about assessing medicines in the HTA context. It's much wider. It's about data sharing in clinical research. Is about avoiding to make the same mistake again. If I know my competitor that the clinical trial has failed for this and that reason, I won't go in the same direction. I'm not repeating that mistake. So that is an intention which is very positive because it's a shortcut to failures, if I would say. And it might also be a shortcut to success in a way that I know that's a direction where it was successful and I want to further continue that journey. So to talk a bit in pictures. So I think when I heard about the European health data space first time, I was really impressed. I think it's a piece of legislation which moves generally in the right direction. Now, as always, the devil is very much in the detail. How do we execute it? What about the administration behind it? Data controller to be defined by member states. And then all those agencies which are involved, which are greenlighting the release of certain data and which are blocking the release of other data. So that can become very complex. To the extent possible, we should have a harmonized approach also in the administration of that. It might have huge potential, and real-world evidence is something which we pushed forward very much to be included, and it is included, and it's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're reaching a bit the end. When you will be looking forward, let's say, to the next 3 to 5 years, what will define a successful market access strategy in Europe? And maybe even the step after, what would you recommend companies what they should now start doing to be really staying ahead?
Well, that's a tough question to say in 5 years what success looks like, because we have to address so many challenges. But it's a good question, of course, because we need to look ahead. And success for me would look like that we first of all get the HTA, EU HTA and the JCA up and running, that we get more slots for joint scientific consultations, that we manage to keep the PICO schemes moderate, not just, as I said before, 10 on average, much lower. I think what success would look like that we find MFN compliant pathways in Europe to make sure that companies can deal with the legislation in the US, or with those programs, better to say, but still bring their products to European patients. That is probably equally important. To create these MFN compliant pathways, whatever the tools are, probably not around confidentiality only, but it might be more volume-based regulation whatsoever, so that we have flexibility in our toolbox when it comes to national pricing and reimbursement procedures and MFN risks. Success looks like having the European Health Data Space up and running in a positive way, so that we can also showcase to the rest of the world, data sharing is regulated also to the positive in Europe, and not only as a restrictive means. There's value in data sharing. It is also that we keep our national pricing and reimbursement systems where they are, and also for example, I read with Rory the report that the orphan privilege in Germany might be deleted. I think that has been one of the strengths of the AMNOG system. That has been one of the reasons why almost all orphan drugs have been launched in Germany. Now, if we're making that mistake to take that privilege away, I think we're completely moving in the wrong direction. It's very important. We can keep it also under the EU HTA. There's no reason to delete it. And these are probably the ingredients for making Europe more competitive. And the last one is about communication. We need to also do our job to communicate to companies that this is a territory with a huge amount of experts in not just in rare diseases, but also in more higher prevalent diseases, a good network of clinics. A lot of innovation comes from Europe and then moves to the US and comes back as a product. So it is a big territory, which is worth to pursue. It's worth to bring in products.
Solid, perfect. Alexander, that was great insights. Thank you for your positive words as well. And
thank you very much.
Thank you
very much. Thanks so much.
Great new episode today with Alexander Natz, the head of EUCOPE, the trade organization for the pharmaceutical companies in Brussels. I think quite clearly this was a clear mandate to come to Europe. I think Europe has a lot of positive things to have. It's not only the size and the network of the clinicians across the different countries, but I think it's also quite clearly, as he said, it's the upcoming European health data space, for example. On top, of course, he also put the right directions, how to also interpret and see the different kind of changes, regulatory changes across the last couple of months and years. I think with the regulatory filing, of course, JCA now basically kicks off HTA quite clearly. Not yet for all the products, that's quite clearly, but by 2030, this will be the kind of case. And he also put the launch obligation into the right kind of perspective. It is rather the opportunity, as he said, to join and launch across the different countries in Europe. And even if you would not so, it's not the sanction across all Europe, but it's also that you have, let's say, 1 year last data protection in the country where no agreement has been reached, or maybe where nothing has been submitted. So, which is, of course, a quite different approach than what has been communicated sometimes by other audiences. I think that's a very important consideration. Of course, on top, quite clearly, MFN has an impact on the strategy, especially now with the launch obligation on top. But ultimately, as he also already said, the communication needs to be clear, and we need to find also in Europe MFN compliant paths towards having products available. Overall, we still need to see how JCA moves forward. The PICO kind of question is still up and open. We have just 13 procedures as of now since early 2025. We need to see how this will evolve further in 2026 and also beyond. But it's quite interesting. It's a very active field, and I think it also quite clearly shows that Europe is moving into a direction with a lot of opportunities. So still stay tuned and come to Europe. That was an episode of MAP, the Market Access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. MAP is available every second week with a new episode, so watch out. And in case you might have questions, contact me directly and or visit our website on www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de.